Thanks for coming, everybody. I'm so excited that this is catching on because, well, because it was my idea, and, but mainly because we have at the Edgartown Library a professional chef on our staff. How great is that? And I just want to take every advantage of that. And that is our chef, Chris Look. This is Chef Look Cooks. Tips and techniques, or maybe I called it techniques and tips. I don't know. I'll change it every week from Chris Look's Kitchen. And Chris, why don't you explain what you're going to do? And I will watch like everybody else and get very hungry.
Beautiful. Well, hello guys. I'm just going to give my hi. I'm going to keep it here so we have a nice view the whole time. But tonight I'm going to cook a couple different dishes that I think are going to go well together. I've got some roast cauliflower that I'm going to glaze with a Dijon maple dill sauce, really simple. And then I'm also going to make some oven baked falafel, which is a beautiful technique that I stumbled upon on the internet when I was researching what I wanted to do for this. And it's really great. You cover the bottom of the pan with oil. You fry in just like a super thin oil coating, and it works perfectly. They become super crispy. The oven itself makes like the outsides nice and toasty as well. It's the best, and it's so much easier than having to deal with fry later oil or stinking up your whole house. And then to go with that, I'm going to make a really simple tahini sauce with just a bunch of tahini, lemon juice, and salt. Like, it's really, really simple. You can't go wrong. And that's really fun because we'll get to see sort of how the tahini reacts with the really acidic lemon juice, and then we're going to soften it out with some water, and it's just going to completely transform. It's really cool. So we're going to sort of basically practice the concept of oven cooking. And one of the problems with ovens is there's only so much space in them. So what we're going to try and do tonight, and hoping it works out perfectly, is we're going to try and time everything completely so that when one thing is done, the other thing is basically ready to go in there. And this is sort of another aspect of mise en place, which is one of my favorite concepts. I'm going to give you guys a quick little peek. I already have all my ingredients set up here. Everything I need to cook tonight is right in front of me, right within arm's reach. I shouldn't have to go very far from you guys. But another concept with that is planning out your schedule so that everything is where it needs to be when the timing comes right. So for us, I've only got 3 pans, and I'm going to need 2 of them for the falafel and 2 of them for the cauliflower. So I'm going to cook the cauliflower first because it's going to take about the same amount of time, but I think it'll be done faster. And what I can do is once it gets nice and brown, I can transfer them all into one pan. That way I have 2 pans left to cook my falafel. And I'll take that last pan out, like, right before we glaze it. We'll throw it back in the oven with the falafel just to get hot again, because it really works good with that glaze. It sort of melts the mustard and makes it stick a lot better. So hopefully that'll all work out in practice, but that's sort of my thought process about the night. So with that said, first thing we're going to want to do is break apart our cauliflower. And so I just got standard business big cauliflower heads here. I'm going to do 2 because I always like to have leftovers. Leftovers are some of my best inspiration for other meals. And so I got 2. They might also all get eaten tonight. This cauliflower is really, really good, and it's good for you. It's maple syrup, no refined sugars or anything like that, and mustard, which is one of the healthiest condiments. And so cauliflower can be a bit hard for some people because it's got a bigger base than broccoli. Broccoli just has that stem. This has a lot of leaves. The leaves are actually really tasty. You can eat them if you're hungry. You certainly can. I usually just compost them. But for me, I have one particular way that I really like to break apart cauliflower. And you go at it like this. You just take one of these leaves and you want to peel it up so you can see underneath where the sort of the florets meet the stem. You want to take a nice knife with a tip, and you just want to shove it in there basically. You're trying to feel stem so that it's nice and solid. And you're just going to sort of cut a little bit, but not all the way through. And then you're just going to do that all the way around the cauliflower, and you're going to twist your knife a little bit, and they'll actually just start popping off like that. If you get really good, you'll get it all in one piece, but sometimes it's okay if you don't. And so that way you have sort of your stem with all your leaves. And again, you can eat this. There's nothing wrong with it. You could boil it and chop it up nice, put it into a curry or something like that. But I'm just going to compost it because I have a very nice compost program here in my house, and it's not going to go to waste. But if you felt like you didn't want to waste it, or if you were just really hungry, there's nothing saying you can't eat your cauliflower stem. Stems are an often thrown away thing that are really quite tasty. And so again, just go right at that corner. You can just cut through the outside. You don't have to sort of peel it up to try and find the center. You just have more to clean up off your cutting board when you're done. So now you've got basically the meat of the cauliflower. And a lot of people will use a knife to cut this up, but I just like to use my hands. It just comes apart really easy if you just go after sort of the areas that they're stuck together. And we want something that's about that size. And again, my hands are pretty big, so that might be a bit smaller for you. But like that's a little bit too big. So what I'll do is you just hold it in your hands like this and just sort of try and break it apart right where the stem is center mass. I didn't do that exactly well, but that's okay. And so these pieces of stem are nice and tender, so you can just throw them in there. They taste plenty fine. And so just sort of break it apart like that, trying to keep some of the stem so that the florets will actually stay together. And I'm gonna just sort of go through all that, do it right in front of you guys here so you can sort of check out my process. And I like to just sort of go from the outside in. It helps. Usually you can sort of find little nice florets that you can just break right off when you do that. And don't be too worried if they're too big or too small. It's just going to change your cook time a little bit. I like them to be fairly large so that they can hold up to the heat long enough before getting mushy so that they actually get some browning. If they are too small, they'll be done cooking before they really get a good brown on the outside. But again, you really can't do this wrong. And if you're worried about making a mess, you can also just bring your bowl over here, which maybe I should do, so I don't make a mess of this beautiful kitchen that my partner cleaned. And you can just break them apart right over your bowl. That way you'll catch all the little tiny pieces that fall off as well. It might make your life a little easier, but that's totally up to you. Do you style. You can definitely do this with a knife too. If I was to do it with a knife, I would take the cauliflower stem up, and then I'd find the spots where I wanted to make florets, and I cut in, and then just twist your knife. Cauliflower is really hard, unlike broccoli, which can be a bit softer. So it works really well with like sort of a twist knife. It'll just break along the natural lines of the cauliflower, and you just keep going right in the end of the stem and then twisting, and you'll end up with pretty decent florets as well. But I like getting my hands in there if I can. I've spent a lot of my time as a chef holding a knife, and so I whenever I can, I like to just get my hands directly on the food. Obviously, make sure your hands are clean. If you're cooking for other people, if you're cooking for yourself, you should probably still clean your hands, but you know, it's a little less important because it's all you. All right, beautiful. And again, big pieces are okay, and the stem is tasty, but you know, sometimes I'm just not like in the mood, and I do have compost, so that helps a lot with me. But if I wasn't composting right now, you can bet your butt I would be making some sort of soup out of these stems. Usually a curry. That's my best bet for any sort of alternate food source like a stem. Is I'll put it in curry and just cook it in a really spicy sauce, and then you can't tell what it is anyways. You just taste like curry. So cool. Breaking these up. And at this point, you know, if you guys were cooking along at home, I hope that you have preheated your ovens already. I like to do it plenty beforehand. It's really great, especially now that the temperature is getting a bit colder, because it's just like a heater. I would not do this dish in the middle of summer. If I was doing this in summer, I'd probably try and cut the cauliflower into like steaks. I don't know if you guys have seen that before. You want to keep the stem intact, and you just sort of cut nice big chunky pieces, and then I'd probably grill it and then just serve the Dijon sauce on the side. So let's take a quick look, make sure these guys are all looking about the right size. And they're going to cook pretty fast. Cool, looks great. So I've got them all in the bowl. All we're going to do now is just give them a base seasoning. This is just going to make sure that they taste good before we put a glaze on them. It's good in case any of your friends don't want a glaze or hate mustard for some reason. So just a healthy amount of pepper, not too much, just because we don't want pepper to be a main flavor. I just really like pepper. And then a little bit of salt, maybe like half a teaspoon to a teaspoon. It doesn't really matter, just enough to make sure that they taste like cauliflower and not like oil. And then a decent amount of oil just to protect them and to help transfer that heat to them so they will get brown. If you don't have some oil in there, the water will start coming out, and they'll steam instead of get nice and crispy. But with the oil, that helps raise the temperature around them. It shoots the water away from them, makes it steam up faster, and that way you'll get a nice crispy cauliflower. And so I'm just doing a nice little toss with my hands. It's something you should practice if you haven't before. If you ever feel weird about it, you can stir with a spoon. Nothing wrong with that, but you just kind of want to put the weight forward and then pull back on the bowl like that. And once you do it enough times, you'll find that it's actually really, really easy. And we just want to spread these all out on our baking sheets. Make sure we leave plenty of space in between the cauliflowers so that they have some good browning space. That's probably about perfect. And put them right in the oven. Let's get our cooking started. And so these are all going to release a lot of moisture. And so we're going to kind of want to burp the oven every now and then. Anytime I think about it, I'm just going to sort of open the top of the oven and then close it real quick. We don't want to let any heat out, but we do want to let moisture out. And if you can, you're going to want to keep these fairly far apart on the oven rack so that they don't trap steam above them. If they're too close, the lower one will trap all of its steam, and this will just steam, whereas the top one gets nice and crispy. So you want them a decent way apart on the rack so that that steam has a chance to escape, head up to the top of the oven, and then we can burp it out. Sweet. So those guys are doing their business. It shouldn't take too long. I'm going to set a timer just so I don't forget. Let's go 10 minutes. They're probably going to take longer than that to cook, but it's just a good place to start so that we can sort of check them out. All right, so now we're going to jump into, make sure my looks good. We're going to jump into making the actual falafel. And so I went ahead and I soaked my garbanzo beans this morning. And so they're a lot bigger than they were when they started. I probably should have saved a dry one just so you can see the difference. But they look like the same size as they would if they were cooked. They're just not cooked. They're completely and utterly raw, which is awesome. I mean, they're not, I guess, completely raw. They have sort of gone through a drying process, which cooked them in some ways. And so now they're soft enough, at least, that we can blend them up. We're just going to add some moisture to them in the form of some herbs and a little bit of oil. And you know, the garlic itself is going to be really good as well in there. So I'm going to leave those to the side. I'm going to prep all my other ingredients that are going in there first. That way I can just work on them in batches. And so what I did there with the garlic, I don't know if you guys saw that, is you put the root end up, stem end down, and you just want to push with the palm of your hand. And this one's being troublesome, so we just flip it, try a different angle. And what should happen is it sort of explodes. There we go. It sort of explodes like that, and you get all the nice little cloves separated from the stem. Get a little husk left behind. I lost a garlic clove. Where'd you go? I'll find it later. There it is. And this is a red garlic, which I know means something, but I can't remember exactly what it is right now. I think it means it's usually spicier, which is good. Oh yeah, oh, it actually smells sweet, so maybe not. Maybe red means sweeter. And so there's a couple different ways people like, this is way more garlic than the recipe calls for, by the way. But I'm cooking it for myself, and I really love garlic. So we're gonna go a bit hard. I'm also doubling the recipe, so that's part of the reason why. The recipe calls for 4 cloves. I'm probably gonna put in about 12, and then I'm gonna double the recipe in the sauce, double the garlic in the sauce as well, just because I really love garlic. So there's a couple different ways you can sort of peel your garlic. I, again, like to use the palm of my hand. You just put the peeled clove there, and you just push. Use both hands. You don't want your palm to get hurt. But if your hands hurt you for any reason, maybe you've been a chef for your whole life or something like that, and you just use your knife too much, you can actually use your knife to save you a little bit of strain. You put the knife blade facing away from you with a flat palm like that, and the knife will actually crush it and do the exact same thing. And once it's crushed, not only is it part of the way to being broken up for our dish, but it also it slips out of its skin really, really easily. Another cool way you can get the skin off of garlic is to put it in between the back end of 2 bowls and just sort of like crush it up and then shake. But that gets a little more messy than I'm usually used to. It's good for mass garlic, and maybe it's good if you have somebody to help you out who is not great in the kitchen and wants something to do. They can pick through and take all the shells out after you basically just shake them out in a metal bowl and get them all broken up. But usually garlic wants to come out of its skin pretty easily. And you can save the skins. They make really good stock. Because I have a compost, I haven't been doing that lately, but Most of my stocks are just meat stocks, but nothing wrong with a good onion skin and vegetable stock. Some of my old chefs would very much disagree with me on that point, saying that you should only use the food that you would eat in your stocks, but I'm a big fan of eating scraps, so I guess I'm still following suit with what they taught me. But yeah, I used to get yelled at for saving onion skins to make stock.
Chris, it's Virginia.
Yes.
When you finish with the garlic, do you think you can pull your camera back just a tiny bit so we get a little, well,
Better?
yeah, I think that's probably good. Oh, even better.
Cool.
Good. Thanks.
Oh yeah. So this is nice today because we're using the Cuisinart. We do not have to worry about really chopping this garlic, but chopping garlic can be a bit of a pain if you want it really small. If you use garlic a lot, like I do, you might want to just do a whole bunch of peeling like this and then put it in your food processor and make the food processor do all the work for you. It'll stay fresh for a pretty decent amount of time in the fridge. But again, that's only if you use a lot of it, because again, you're going to want to be using like a bulb a day for something like that. Otherwise, it will start to oxidize and the flavor really dissipates. But you can also just chop it. And I like big pieces of garlic. I remember watching a show when I was a kid with Mario Batali, and he was talking about how there's like a technique where you purposefully cut the onion knife or the garlic nice and big so that the flavor still goes into the dish, but then whoever doesn't want to eat it and have garlic breath can pick it out. And so I do that so that I know when I'm getting garlic and I get really excited about it. But it is a useful technique for those who don't really like having whole chunks of garlic in their food. But I do like whole chunks of garlic in my food. It's one of the most exciting things ever. When I'm making like a curry that I put a ton of garlic in, and I just get a spoonful with like 2 whole cloves of garlic and a piece of potato or something. It's so tasty. Garlic. So yeah, fresh garlic does take time, but oh man, that flavor is worth it. And time is something we have right now because we are waiting on our cauliflower to finish roasting. Sweet. So one of the cool things about garlic that I'm sure any of you who have picked apart cloves like this have noticed is that it's kind of sticky. It's got these this interesting defense mechanism where it wants to sort of heal itself back together. Squash is kind of similar. I don't think it's the exact same chemical, but it gets very sticky. And so the things are just like sticking to my hand, which is funny, but it's actually gonna be really useful for us later because we're putting garlic into this dish that doesn't really have a lot of binders. Generally, anytime you're making sort of a cake like this with a, like croquettes or anything like that, you need something to bind it, whether it be eggs or beans or some sort of liquid protein. And so the garbanzo beans do have plenty of protein in them, and they'll help a lot with the binding. But the garlic has this sort of sticky nature to it. It will also help sort of stick everything together as we tamp them together and get them ready for the oven. It's mainly the garbanzo beans, but the garlic certainly helps. All right, so lots and lots of garlic, as you can see. Beautiful. All right, so garlic is done. We'll just put that to the side. So the next thing we're going to need for this is going to be some red onion. And so this is far too much red onion than what the recipe calls for, but that's perfectly okay. So I'm just going to cut the root end off, and then I'm going to cut the top off and cut it right in half. I'm just going to make it easy. That's usually my go-to cut up for onions, unless I'm trying to do something really fancy. I cut the root end right off. If I'm trying to do something fancy, I'll leave the root end on. It helps to hold all the pieces together so they don't go slipping apart. And that way I can do things like, cut it this way and cut it that way and then cut it this way and get a really, really fine dice. Or I can do something crazy like if I'm doing it for the grill, for instance, I'll leave the root end on so that I can cut it into wedges and those wedges won't fall apart on the grill. But in general, if I'm cutting up an onion, especially if I'm just trying to do it really fast, I just cut both ends off, make sure that it falls apart really easy when it comes time. And so we aren't going to, again, the Roboku is going to do, or I've now called it 3 different things. The food processor is going to do most of our work. So we just need to do sort of a rough chop here. And this is my favorite way to cut up onions when I'm doing a rough chop is you want to cut, a lot of people cut this way first, but I like to, you want to sort of cut with the grain first. That breaks it up into nice wedges. And then from there you can cut yourself some cubes. And we're only going to need a cup of red onion. So let's see, I actually brought a half cup just to measure it out. So that's about a cup right there. So I actually have this extra red onion, and this is something I found out when I was testing this recipe is, well, if you ever had falafel, I really like them with pickled red onions. And so we're actually going to pickle these onions. We're just going to do a quick pickle. It's going to be really simple, just some salt and white vinegar. And so again, I'm cutting with the grain on this, and you're just going to want to sort of turn your knife as you go so that you get nice thin strips of onion that break apart and will be nice and easy and quick. And then once you get to this sort of end part, you don't really have a lot to work on. Just tip it right over and then just keep going. Helps to keep your fingers away from everything. And we're just going to put these in a bowl. Just break them apart a little bit. And we're just going to salt these. And so what the salt's going to do is it's going to start to break down the cell walls and open them up so that when we do end up putting some vinegar on here, they'll suck it right up. What'll happen first is that they'll open up and the water that's trapped in there that has all that nice onion flavor will seep out. If we wanted to, if we weren't into like super oniony onions, we could take that. Thank you. That is to check my oven. We could take that liquid away. Maybe even rinse the onions if we wanted to before we pickle them. But I love the salt. I love the super onion flavor. So just a little bit of salt in there. We're really just kind of seasoning them. And we're just gonna let them sit while we continue the rest of our prep here. And what will happen is they'll, like I said, they'll start to break down and they'll get almost droopy. And that's how we know it's time to put the vinegar on them. Whew, these onions are intense. All right, so let's check our oven and let's see how we're looking here. Oh yeah, so you can hear them sizzling, that's perfect. Exactly what we want. Just gonna do them a quick little stir. They've really just come up to temperature. It's not, they haven't really started to brown or cook too heavily, but just give them a good stir, toss them back in, and we'll set our timer for 10 minutes again. This time I'll try and remember to actually burp the oven because there's definitely a lot of moisture that came out of there. All right, cool. So onions are good. Garlic is good. Next thing we're gonna need are gonna be our herbs. So cilantro and parsley are the two I've chosen. I think they're probably the two best, but any green herb is gonna work. It needs to be leafy. You want it to have a decent amount of water content, so maybe not rosemary. Also, that would probably be very intense, but I don't see why not. If you really like rosemary, make rosemary falafel. Do you? So I think this parsley is dirty. The cilantro is nice and clean. Don't try and wash all that sand off of there. You can. Definitely don't want little crunchies in your falafel that aren't crispy pieces of bean. And all right, so we just want the tops really. The stems are plenty tasty, and you can eat them again. Especially cilantro stems. It's actually a pretty classic technique to just use the entire bunch, including the stems in like a salsa. They had a really nice crunch, and they're super tender and super tasty. So there's really no reason why you can't use them. But again, in this situation, we don't want too much moisture in there. The beans are already fairly wet from being soaked, and we don't want to have too much water. So we're actually going to take the stems out just to ensure that we have a nice tacky patty that we can form later. So everything's good. Everything's in its place. We've got the beans, the garlic, the onions, the greens. I got my seasonings right here. And so we're going to work in batches again because I doubled this recipe. It's not going to all fit in one. So I'm just going to move some things around real quick, and we are going to bring the Roku out front so you can sort of see how this looks when it's all coming together. Again, Roku is just another name for a food processor. All right, let's see. How's that look? There we go. Perfect. That'll do. Okay, sweet. So we're going to take about half of each of our ingredients. Half the garbanzo beans. Half of each of our herb mixtures. You can cut them up if you want beforehand, but that's the beauty of using a machine like this is it does all the hard work for you. Half of our onion, and not half of our garlic because we're going to save some of that for the sauce, but you know, a good amount of cloves. Again, it said 4. I'll probably use 6 for each batch. And then we just want a little bit of salt, about a teaspoon. Some pepper. They said if you're using fresh ground, about 24 turns. I really like the pepper, so let's go 30. All right, and then some cinnamon and some cumin. So I've got fresh cinnamon, and so fresh cinnamon sticks are really nice if you've never used them. They can be a bit hard to turn into powdered cinnamon, so feel free to just use normal cinnamon. But I'm going to use a microplane, which is a really great tool for getting zest off of lemons, limes, etc. It's also really great for zesting things like cinnamon sticks or nutmeg, which is what I usually use this for. So you just want to place it right over the top of your food processor and just go back and forth until you get about a half a teaspoon. You should be able to see it right up top. Oh, it smells so good. Sorry if that sound is bad for anybody, but I personally love the sound of a microplane doing its work. All right, that should be good enough for that batch. And then for the cumin, again, I like to use whole spices when I can. So I've got some whole spice cumin. I'm just going to put it right into my mortar and pestle. And I like cumin almost as much as I like garlic, so I'm definitely using more than the recipe called for because I want my falafel to taste like cumin, and I want my whole life to taste like cumin if I can. It is one of my favorite flavors. And so I'm just going to crush a bunch of that up. And if you ever use a mortar and pestle, it's really easy. You actually just sort of put it in there and you just stir. And the mechanics of it sort of do the job for you. They start to sort of crush the things up against the side and break it all up. And I'm just going to put it up near my chest is where I usually like to put it and sort of overhand the mortar there. And it doesn't matter if you get these completely powdered. Obviously, if you're using powder, you're probably going to want to follow the recipe. But I find with whole seeds like this, it tends to not get broken up all the way, and I'll get like a couple whole seeds in my actual dish, which I personally love. I love crunching down on a whole cumin seed. It just explodes in cuminy flavor. I am a big fan. And if you wanted to, you could also toast these in a dry pan beforehand to sort of help get their flavor really, really pushed up to the max. But I think I just use more, and that works fine for me. And they'll get that toasty flavor when they cook in the oven. All right, so that's our first batch. We just need a little bit of olive oil, said for about a tablespoon. So I'm just going to put a little bit in there. And then we need the top. There it is. Beautiful. And we're just going to hit on and watch it all come together. Usually a good idea anytime you're using a food processor to stop it at some point in between. Scrape down your sides, make sure everything's combining. My herbs are giving me some trouble. Maybe I should have cut them up, but we'll get them in there. Push everything in. Perfect. Go back. Put the oven. Oh yeah, that looks good. It's starting to stick to the sides. That's good. That means that it's nice and tacky like we want it. Just do one more scrape down. They say to go till it's smooth. You definitely want it to be pretty smooth, but there's nothing wrong with having some chunks in it. What we're hoping is that this stuff that's sticking to the side will fold over and get back in there, but it doesn't, not seeming like it wants to. So we just got to give it some help. And this is all a good thing. The fact that it's so sticky, that it's sticking to the sides and doesn't want to fold back in on itself is, that means we're gonna have a really good dough. When we go to form it, we're not gonna have any problems. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so we are going to place this aside, and I'm going to do my other batch, which is basically just going to be following the exact same thing we did. And just so you guys can see it, I'm going to pull a little bit of this out. It's definitely wet. Don't be worried if it's a bit wet, but it's nice and it like patties up real good. You can hear that. It's sticking to my finger, but it's not like coming up with my finger, which means it's going to patty up really good. You can just eat it right now if you want to. It's just going to be a little starchy. It smells really good. All those herbs and everything. When I was younger, I used to get falafel a lot, and it would always be brown. And I had it when it was green for the first time, and I thought it was some revolutionary experience. But I guess I was told at the time, and what I sort of figured out since, is that it's actually a much more classical way of doing it. There's really no reason not to put all those herbs in there, and the reason you usually get brown falafel is because somebody's being cheap. There we go. All right, so let's make our second batch, and we're just going to follow the exact same steps. Beans, greens, let's tear them up this time so we get a little better experience. Onions and garlic. Let's see, so we're going to want 4 cloves left over-ish for our sauce. We'll put the rest in here. Go garlic crazy. About a teaspoon of salt. 24 plus cranks on your pepper grinder, depending on how good your pepper grinder is at grinding. Perfect. All right, there's our cumin. The rest of our cumin I did up earlier. And then here comes everybody's favorite noise. A little bit of, what's this called again? Cinnamon. Nice. Thank you, Connor. Probably good. Fresh cinnamon is definitely a lot stronger than the cinnamon that you buy. It hasn't any oxidation happen to it. It is just going to be super intense and fresh. So it is okay to use a little bit less as well. All right, so let's get this guy going and combined while I stir up. I'm just going to stir up the cauliflower. See how that's going. Probably start to have some browning already happening now because it has been about 20 minutes. So let's hope that we do. All right, perfect. So that's starting to get brown, which is good. And imagine it's probably going to be done in the next 10 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my first pan for the falafel in the oven and start getting that preheated. So what you want to do is you want to put about a 1/4 cup of oil on a pan. That's what I'm doing behind here. Let me get this guy out of the way, actually, just so you can sort of see. You want to put a good amount of oil on your pan. And just sort of spread it all out. You want it to have just a tiny bit of a cover, but enough that there's enough oil to cover the whole pan. And it will be a lot thicker before it goes in the oven, so it's okay if it doesn't cover it perfectly. Once it gets hot, it will spread out perfectly and make a nice cooking platform. So I'm going to put this in the oven to preheat. That way we'll have a nice pan. We'll have a nice pan to start with and get our first batch of falafel going while we while we make the sauces and everything like that. So let's spread this, scrape this down, get this combined properly, and we'll be good. I got a feeling we're gonna have a little bit of time to chat, relax while the second batch of falafel goes, but we'll see how things go. It's okay to plan out your meal and make sure you have all your things and your time in place, but sometimes things don't always go as you plan, and you just gotta have fun, make it chill, and and enjoy yourself. Tasty. I haven't looked at the chat yet. I hope I'm not ignoring any important questions. I promise we'll get to some. Perfect. That looks good. All right, so we're just going to combine these two together. That way, if there were any inconsistencies that we had between the two different batches, they're just going to come right out as we put everything together in the same bowl. Oh, yeah. Whoa! Just set my spatula flying. I don't even know how I got caught on my long sleeves. So yeah, cooking with long sleeves is not something I do every day, but this is what I wore to work, and I was like, you know what, this looks pretty good. I'm gonna cook in it. I've already been foiled. So this is what it's gonna look like when it's done. It is this beautiful green color. You can see little flecks of red in there from the red onion. It is a beautiful thing to behold. And it sounds good. When you stir, you can like hear it sticking to itself, but it's like forming nice balls that like want to stay together. It's not too soupy. This is actually much better than the batch I made the first time. I'm really excited about it. And so yeah, so that's it. That's our falafel batter. That's basically done. I'm gonna put that aside tonight for now. We're gonna get ourselves back into sort of prep mode, make sure our timing is sort of working out properly. All right, so first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna check on my onions, and they're looking really good. They're sort of shiny and glossy, and one thing that's way different than they were before is they're much more bendy. They don't really want to snap, and that's because that salt has started to break down they're very very solid and crunchy cell walls and made them soft and permeable. So that this vinegar that I'm going to add is going to just slip right in there. And I love vinegar. I'll actually use the vinegar after. So I just go to town and put full vinegar right over the top of them until they're covered. But you can make a brine, like a proper brine with, you know, adding some water to dilute it and everything like that. But I leave the salt right on there, and I just put straight vinegar on there, and that sort of makes my brine. I also just really, really, really love vinegar. So I'm totally okay with just going to town. And I'm actually going to put these in the fridge now. And I don't know if it's just my brain and how it thinks, but I always feel like they taste better when they're cold. And I feel like they sort of get some of their crunch back. So I don't know if the coldness, you know, I don't know everything about all the science behind things, but the coldness seems to make them pickle a bit faster, and it seems like they get a lot more crunchy. So, so that's why I like to put them in the fridge. They also just taste nice when it's sort of that cold going with that nice hot and crunchy falafel. So it's a good texture, taste, feel thing. All right, we're just gonna clean that up real quick. All right, sweet. So let's take a peek at our cauliflower. Give them a little burp. Yeah, nice. They're starting to get crispy, which is good. That means that they have started to cook completely on the inside, and that means that they have a high enough temperature that the ambient temperature of the oven is starting to brown their outsides, which is what we want. That's everything we want from roasting. Is we want the insides to cook at the same temperature as the outsides. That's why you want a really hot oven and not something probably hotter than you even would want for a normal cook, just because you're going to be opening it a lot, and so you want it to be able to recover. And that way, the inside gets up to cooking temperature really fast, and it allows you to actually get some color on the outside, as opposed to a slow cook, which would basically just sort of cook it from the outside in and steam it. We do really, 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 really want to get that moisture out of there so we can get some nice caramelization. And that's what's starting to happen. So we're good. We're in a good place. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to start chopping up some garlic, but I think midway between that, I'm going to put all those cauliflower in one pan to finish roasting. And then I'm going to get that other pan covered in oil so that we're ready to go on both of our batches of falafel. All right, sweet. So way I like to do garlic is I basically act like I'm Mario Batali, and I'm trying to cut those thin slices. So I'll line them all up facing the same way, and then I'll just cut thin little discs, and they'll already fall apart because we crushed them earlier, so that'll help with the process. But this way, you get them cut sort of against the grain. You've got pretty small pieces, and we could even just stop right there, but for a sauce, we're going to want to go a lot smaller just so we don't have too big a chunks sort of getting in the way. And so we'll just do that again on this side. And we'll have a nice little pile here, and then we can just run our knife over the pile and get it nice and tiny for a sauce. And there are tools that'll do this for you, but you know, it's nice, and it smells so good when you get it on your hands. All right, cool. So spread your knife over it. Not really much you can do with your hand here to sort of keep this together. You just want to try and get your knife as high as possible so you're not just like pushing the garlic along. You want to make sure you actually are moving around and cutting different pieces every time. And every now and then just wipe it off, gather it back up, and make sure you use the back of your knife if you're doing this. Don't ever scrape the sharp part of your knife on your cutting board. It's a quick way to get a dull knife, and or a very sad and upset chef if your chef happens to be the one that sharpens your knives, which I was so happy to have an opportunity to work with. This is the best when your chef is like, "Hey, you want me to sharpen your knife?" It's just such a great feeling. I do like getting my knife on a whetstone, but it's really a beautiful thing when somebody else does it for you. And I've had a lot of different knives in my time of cooking. I like them all. I never really had a bad knife. Right now, the one I'm using a lot at home is this one right here. It's actually a really cheap knife, which I love because I can just do a lot of work with it. But the reason I like it is it's really, really thin and light. So after working in a kitchen for so long, your hand sort of starts to get a little bit atrophied. Not atrophied, what's the word? Fatigued. And so having a nice light knife like this is really great. It's got the cool little like air pocket things, which is great for like cutting onions and potatoes. It's definitely something that you can see a lot on cheaper knives because they don't have the same release in their steel that that a really good knife would have. But even good knives have this. Like I have a Shun over here that I hesitate to show you because I haven't used it in forever, but it's got them too. And that's just it helps with releasing food. So anyway, so the Shun's really nice. They're also very expensive. This one's super cheap. It is a H.J. Henkel or J.A. Henkel's Zwilling steel, and I got it in a double pack with this little tiny guy right here, which I really like for boning out fish. It's got a little bit of flex to it, which is nice. If you're doing like a whole fish and you want to take out the whole backbone and the ribs, a little bit of flex to your knife is really useful. But I really like this one for working at home. It's thin, it's light, and it's just a lot of fun. But over the time that I've been cooking, I've gathered a whole bunch of knives. This one's my first knife that I really worked hard with. This is a Nora knife. Can't recommend them enough. They are, that is a personal endorsement, by the way. They are a really beautiful family that just makes knives for fun. The problem nowadays is that they've kind of blown up, and finding a Nora knife online is like a 2-year wait. So you might not be able to find one for yourself, but they are a really, really fun company, and they make beautiful knives. The knife that I used while I was a chef is this beautiful thing right here, which has been beat up to complete and utter. It still works, but there's like a bend in the blade here. I used to, lend it out. And this is a Dahlstrong. It's actually a fairly easy to find knife on some of our more popular public online ordering companies that I will not mention. But that's where I got this one. I got it on a really sweet deal when they were just sort of bringing themselves into the market. And this is a Kiritsuke, which is it's a really long knife. It's got a tip that's pointed, but it also has a nice flat piece right here. And that means that's really good for chopping vegetables. It's also good for cutting meat. It's basically an all-purpose knife. Usually only the head chef has one of these because that way he can sort of move about the kitchen and do whatever he likes. But I got one because I'm a big dude, and this is a big knife, and it's really, really comfortable for me. So those are sort of my 3, I would say, favorite knives that I usually use all the time. I have more because I feel like it's just a chef thing. You always have more knives. But I just hit the timer, so I'm gonna go ahead and check these collies. Oh yeah, perfect. All right, so let's take these out. Let's put them together. They're hot enough now that I'm not too worried about them steaming themselves, so they should be able to just sort of finish up the browning experience together, and you can see, look at how good that looks. It's not going to take too long. I'm going to put them on the bottom rack of my oven because I know this oven, that's where the hottest is, and that'll get the bottom of the pan nice and hot and help for them to get that, that last brown, even though they are a bit crowded. So they'll cook from the bottom up. And those are perfectly cooked. Seasoned really good. We did a good job, guys. So I'm just going to put some oil on this other pan that I just took the cauliflower out of, just like we did before. I'm going to throw that in the oven, and that is going to get nice and hot and ready to cook my cauliflower. And I'm just going to check another pan out here. Yeah, it looks good. It's covered perfectly in oil, so we're good to go. So I'm actually going to stop making my sauce, and I'm going to start forming some patties because I think realistically in the next couple of minutes here we'll be able to put our falafel right in the oven. So we're going to put those aside, and we're going to start forming some patties. All right, so the cauliflower, or sorry, the falafel batter is good to go. It actually has dried out a little more now that it's been out. And so we're going to grab little balls, and for me it's sort of what fits in my like little pinch. You can measure it if you want. It's about 2 tablespoons maybe. And we're just going to plop it into our nice open cupped palm, and then back and forth, and just give it a little squeeze every time. Just a little squeeze, and then let it fall, and then a little squeeze. And you want to sort of just squeeze it into a nice little ball, just like that. And then you're just going to give it a little tap, 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 tap. Make a nice little patty. And this dough is really good. And you can just sort of form it, get some nice flat sides. I really like that. Form it up into a perfect little patty, and then just lay it on your cutting board. This dough is so much nicer than the one I did last time. I don't know what I did differently, but it is beautiful. So just make a little ball, make a little patty, and then just sort of fix your edges if you have any cracks, which you will. It's not a perfect dough. It's definitely designed to be a bit dry, so that's good. And just we're just going to keep doing this. If you got any friends, again, that aren't super happy about cooking, this would be a great task for them to do so they can feel like they were involved in dinner. It doesn't take a lot of work, and it's kind of messy, which I always find that my non-cook friends really enjoy the messy tasks. They just don't like cleaning up, which, I mean, let's be honest, I don't know who does. And if you do, you're invited to my house. I'll cook you falafel any day of the week, but you have to clean up. All right, let's see. Are there any messages? No. If you guys have any questions, now's definitely a good time to ask them. We're going to be heading into sort of the more relaxed session, the piano lounge version, part of this experience. I always tend to cook pretty fast. I like to do more than one thing at once if I can. Always be busy in the kitchen. That's why mise en place is such a great experience for me, because I don't have to focus on my ingredients. I just have to focus on my method. Everything's right near me, right where I need it. I try and set my kitchen up that way too. That way, when you know, things go crazy and I'm cooking 4 things at once, I can, you know, still function because everything's right there and I know where it is. But later, as things are sort of cooking in the oven, it is generally a good time to sort of relax. You know, you don't have to really pay attention. As stovetop cooking, you're always stirring and checking and figuring things out. But the oven tends to be a timer experience. You saw we set some timers that really help to keep things together and going. But there's a lot of waiting in oven cooking, and I'm okay with that. Looking good and smelling good too. Like, the crazy part is how good this smells, even when it's raw. It could help that I really like garlic and raw onions, but it just, the herbs themselves too, like everything's popping out. It's a beautiful experience over here. And don't be worried if yours aren't the same size, or if you want to make them bigger, you can. If you want to make them smaller, you can. If you want to make them different shapes, you can. You could do, there are some sort of falafels that are more sort of round like this. And then instead of having like a flat patty, they're just flat on one side. So you can sort of form them into a little ball like that and just squish them down, something like that kind of. You could do that too. It's totally up to you. They're going to cook fine, but for the oven method, the flat patties are just going to cook faster. You're not going to end up with an overcooked outside and a still sort of wet and mushy inside, just because the surface area is larger, and the larger your surface area, the more places where heat can sort of assault your food and cook it. Whereas with those little sort of dumplings that I showed you earlier, there's much less surface area to mass, and so it'll take longer to cook all the way through, and it could make the outside too crispy. Could be great though if you want them really crispy. I've actually never tried it that way, so what we're gonna do, since we're here and since I'm talking about it, is we're gonna cook one that way just to see what happens. See if it comes together at the same time as the other falafel, or if it needs more time, and see if it gets burnt or what. Because that's what we're here to do: is experiment, have fun, and figure out what we like to do best. So, in classic me sense, I've started with a beautiful, perfectly sized one, and they've just continuously gotten bigger. But hey, what are you gonna do? So cool. So we have enough to do our first pan. So I'm gonna go ahead and take that pan out. That's the one we put in there first. Oh, here it is. I always like to have a towel to wipe my hands, wipe my stuff up. Tend to wash my hands a lot when I'm cooking, but that's just what it is. All right, so sweet. So let's take out our first pan. Take a look at this cauliflower. Cauliflower looks good. Actually going to take the cauliflower out. And what we'll do is we'll toss the cauliflower back in there as we get close to the end of the cooking experience, just so it gets nice and warm before we glaze it. But it's looking really good. It's got some nice brown spots all over it. Definitely completely cooked. Oh gosh, it smells so good. So you can see it's got like a nice brown spot there from the bottom of the pan, and then the tops, the tips and stuff are still getting a little brown too. So really, really good. Oh, so tasty. And you can just eat it like that. Like, you don't need to glaze it with honey or with maple and mustard and dill, but I just really like to. So we got our hot oil in the pan, just sort of move it around, make sure it's nice and coated. And we're gonna try and fit 12 on each of these. So you just wanna start in one corner and just plop them on there. You should hear a little bit of the sizzle because the oil is nice and hot. You probably can't hear it on your side. It's not really that strong. It's just like a sort of shh. That means that your oil is hot enough and ready to rock. These are starting to fall apart. Maybe I'll use two hands. Let's arrange them in a nice 3x4. Make sure they're good, and then get that right back in the oven as fast as you can. You don't want to lose any heat on that. We're gonna go right on the bottom. Perfect. Okay, sweet. So that was our first one. We'll let that other pan preheat for a little bit while we make these last patties, and then we'll put it in there. So timer for 15 minutes. We're good to go. Let's make some more patties. I'll make these ones a little bit smaller because I'm supposed to get another 9 out of this, but I think I made some of these a little too big. Here, let's make our test falafel. Make a couple of those just to see. And so now this batter is good to go for pretty much anything. If you had a deep fryer, like, you could just use this. Oh, hold on a sec. But you certainly, I feel like now that I know about this oven method, I will likely never cook falafel another way. It's just so easy. There's a lot of downtime, which is nice. And unless you do other things, like if I wanted to, I could be cooking some amazing, meat dish above this, do some lamb or something crazy like that. In all honesty, though, if it's me, I'm probably cooking venison because I have an abundance of venison in this house. All thanks to my glorious father. All right, one more. Let's see. So we ended up with 1, 2, 3. So we ended up too short, which is totally fine. Definitely a product of me making way too big of falafels, but that's okay. Just means somebody's going to be nice and well fed. I'll make that one like that too. So we got these little ball falafels for a tester, and the rest are going to be the ones that are sort of by the recipe book. So my oven's kind of weird, so I'm actually going to turn it off, turn it back on again. Okay, cool. And we're also changing temperature here. We do want the temperature at 375. So I'm actually just going to leave it at 400. Oh, good, it's still hot. Perfect. Like I said, my oven can be a bit awkward, especially with opening and closing. So I usually will bake higher than recipes tell me, just to make sure that everything gets cooked. All right, cool. So we're going to need this bowl. Make 2 sauces here in a second once I get this last batch of falafel in. That's going to be nice and tasty. So, got some free time. We can sort of fix up our mise en place, make sure everything's together again. I've got my my tahini, my lemon in one place. I've got my apple cider vinegar, my maple syrup, and my mustard and my dill in one place. That way we are ready to rock and make our sauces, which are going to be perfect accompaniments to this. And you can always put them together. Like you can use the maple mustard dill sauce on your falafel if you want to. I don't see why not. We're already going to kind of be, I mean, I plan on making a little cauliflower falafel sandwich because I just can't help myself. I'm a sandwich fiend. But do whatever makes you comfortable in general. And if it doesn't make you comfortable, try it anyways and see how it goes. Maybe you'll be more comfortable than you thought. There's a long time where I didn't feel comfortable doing a lot of things, and then you just get forced to do them enough times, and all of a sudden somebody's calling you a professional chef. Okay, cool. I think our other pan is probably heated up enough. Oh yeah, I can hear those guys going to town in there. They look good. You can see that there's little crispy bubbles coming up on the sides. Whoops, got some oil on my towel. All right, so let's load this one up here. There we go. That was a little louder. That's good. Means it was even hotter. Beautiful. Get that back in the oven. Just give it a little tilt, make sure the oil is all everywhere. We are good to go. Okay, awesome, sweet. So those are in the oven. They're looking really good. We got our timer set. So let's jump into our sauces. So first sauce we're gonna do is the tahini sauce, which is right here. And so we got that garlic we chopped up earlier. I like it a little chunky, so I am gonna just keep it. There we go. I'm just gonna keep it the way it is. But you can chop it up more if you want. And this is way more garlic than what was called for, like by a lot. And I'm okay with that. I really, 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 really like garlic. I can't say it enough. Get myself that spatula from earlier. And we're gonna get some tahini. So I can only find one kind of tahini on the island. I usually like the stuff that comes in the small, short can. But I found this stuff and I went with it. And it actually is really good. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all sesame seeds. So it's hard to sort of get bad tahini. But in general, if you can, try and source your things ethically and do what you can. But it's actually about half a jar. Each jar is a pound, and we're using, the recipe calls for half a cup, but we're going to use a whole cup because we're doubling the recipe. And so, so we're just going to use half this jar, and I already used half earlier when I made the first batch for testing. In case you guys haven't ever heard of it before, a nice way to remember how much a pound is in measurement is a pint is a pound the world around. That's what my dad used to say. Pints a pound the world around, which is kind of not true considering the fact that some people don't use pints or pounds. But I guess technically if you had a pint or a pound measurement, it would work no matter where you were. And the idea is that anything that's basically about water density is going to weigh a pound for every pint. So that's half a pound for a cup, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's a really nice way to sort of remember your conversions if you ever need to convert between weight and volume with anything that's similar to water in density. And while this is a little bit more dense than water, it's not that much more dense that it's going to have a noticeable difference over a small measurement like a pint. So we're going to get all of that really good. And I mean, realistically, like, you could just throw some salt in this and call it a day. Tahini is so good. But we're going to add some acid in there because the tahini can really be, it almost is like a dry feeling in your mouth. So the acid will help to sort of brighten that up. So we're going to put some salt in here just to help with some of the bitterness from the tahini. And then we're going to go for some lemon juice. And so the recipe calls for quarter cup. Yeah, so it's half as much as the tahini we put in there. So again, we're doubling it, so we're going to use a half a cup. And this is really fun. I love the way tahini reacts with lemon juice. So the first thing you're going to notice is that this tahini particularly is pretty wet. You see that? Yeah, it's pretty wet. I'm actually going to tilt this down so that you can see it a little better. It's fairly wet for tahini. Tahini sometimes can be really solid, but when we put this lemon juice in here, the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to actually get more wet because you're adding the lemon juice, and you're going to get a nice, so you're almost going to think like, oh cool, it's getting nice and smooth, and it's going to be really, really nice sauce. I love this. I'm excited about my tahini and lemon juice. And then all of a sudden, you're going to see it start to happen here. The tahini is just going to seize up and become this like complete and utter mess of a sauce. And that is the acid working on the proteins and getting it to become the this really sort of ugly paste that we're dealing with here. And that's not good for dipping at all. It'd be good for maybe making Play-Doh or something. Look at that. It went from a really crazy smooth thing. We actually added moisture and it got solid. Really cool chemistry there. I'm always a big fan of that. Oh, I spilled a bunch on my knife. So what we're going to do here to break this sort of emulsion now is we're going to add water. And that's going to sort of act as a buffer between the acid and the protein. Is going to get in there in between, and it's going to smooth the whole process out. So I'm just going to add half a cup. So the recipe called for 6 tablespoons. Another good conversion to remember is that 4 tablespoons is a quarter cup. Both of them have 4 in them. So 4 tablespoons, 1 quarter. That's a really nice and easy conversion. So if we want 6 tablespoons, we're going to want basically half a cup plus a quarter cup, because we're doubling that again. So it'll be 12. So I'm going to start with the half a cup right now because I know it's going to take at least that much. And then I'm going to have some more water available that I can add as I like. And so we're going to now sort of watch this go exactly back the other way to its beautiful smooth self. And you could use a whisk for this. It's actually a lot easier with a whisk, but I really didn't pick a big enough bowl for this. But you're just going to sort of go for it. You know what? Actually, I'm going to get the whisk out. Let's do it. Let's do it the right way for once. Whisk is going to really make your life easier. Whisks are nice because they don't have a lot of surface area, but they have a lot of power to them. And so you can get through chunky things like this without spilling it all over the place. And again, use a bigger bowl. Be smarter than me. Use a bigger bowl so you can really go to town on this and whip it up. And so that's starting to come together, but I can tell it's definitely still really thick. And we want it to be super soft and not exactly runny, but you know, dribbly enough that it can be dipped and still sort of stick. So I'm going to actually put almost all of this quarter cup right in there, just because I'm looking at it and it's pretty thick. So nice small motions will help you to sort of stay in your very small bowl that maybe you decided to choose, despite my warnings. But because it's a whisk, you'll still get a decent amount of mixing done. You can see it's starting to get like way smoother. It's beautiful. It's a really fun transformation to see it go from this like beautiful smooth paste into this like just mess of a block of tahini, and then work its way back again and become something that's really, really tasty. I already feel like I didn't put enough salt in there, so I'm gonna put a bit more in right now. And it looks like it still wants a bit more water, so I'm gonna put a little more in there too. And this is up to you, your sort of preference of how thick you like it. You can't really go wrong. You could put, you know, a whole another half a cup of water in there and just make it super thin and dribble it over the top or use it as like a salad dressing or something. I'm not going to stop you, I promise. There we go. So now that it's nice and smooth, it's a lot easier to sort of really beat hard and get nice and smooth. And so yeah, that looks really good. See that it's just like it's coming off a nice sort of rope. Still a little chunky. That's mostly the garlic, but that looks good. So you can just throw a pinky in there. Oh yeah, coat your finger good. Give it a try. That's good. Garlic's nice and crunchy. Super acidic from the lemon. Definitely a little bitter from the tahini, so I'm gonna add a bit more salt, which will help break that down. And the garlic is bitter too, but I like bitter things. And that should be perfect. Oh yeah, a little bit more salt really just changes everything. That's our sauce, and you could transfer that into another bowl if you wanted to, for serving. Really impress everybody, but I am nothing if not resourceful, so I will be keeping it right in my bowl and serving it to all my friends, and they can tell me that I did it wrong if they like to, but I just like to save on dishes when I can. All right, sweet. Do a little quick cleanup here. It's almost time to flip our falafel. I'm actually gonna just go ahead and do it right now. I'll give you guys a quick little preview of what we have in store. So you can see them, they're starting to sizzle. It's beautiful when you take them out. You can hear them go to town. The color has darkened a lot as those raw herbs have started to cook. And you just want to sort of look at the bottom. Nice, getting sort of crispy. I'm just gonna flip these really quick and I'll show you one of the ones towards the end. You wanna get them back in the oven as fast as possible. Oops, I broke one. Oh no, that's okay. Using a spatula is gonna be better than this flat spoon, but so it goes. And don't worry if they're not super brown right off the bat. You really just want the bottom to be starting to cook and stay crispy. It'll have absorbed some of the oil, and when we put them back in the oven, oh, this one's perfect. Look at that. So that's just the one side. So we're just going to cook the other side, and we'll be good to go. But the oil will still be on them, and so that top will start to finish browning as you put them back in the oven, which we're going to do right now. And just rotate them, whichever one was on top, put on the bottom, etc. We're just going to give that other one a little bit of time. Let's see, 3 minutes, just because we did put it in there a bit later. We'll get to starting on our cauliflower sauce. Sweet. So that's one of the sauces done. Now we just have to do our cauliflower sauce, which is pretty easy. And there is a recipe that I posted for this, but I tend to not follow recipes when I'm dealing with mustard sauces like this. I usually just sort of follow what my taste is like for the day. The only thing that's pretty consistent is going to be the herbs. So these are the last of the dill from my garden. They got a little freezer burnt last night, sadly. I was super excited to see that there was still dill out there. And then it got real cold. And even dill, which is usually pretty good at dealing with cold, is gonna get freezer burnt eventually. But it still smells amazing. Super sweet. Something about dill you grow yourself. I don't know if it's the variety that's different than the stuff you buy in the store or what, but it's so much sweeter. I actually really love dill with like ceviche. You do like a sweet vinegar, like almost like a bread and butter with dill, and then you put it on like a really fatty fish for a ceviche. It's so good. So with dill, pretty much all herbs, what I like to do is you get them all set up, all the stems facing you. Get them sort of lined up perfectly so they're nice and together. And then what I'll do is I'll fold the stems into the top of the leaves. And that gives me a nice sort of like flat area here to start with. And you just keep it all bunched up. You just want to run your knife, make as thin a slices. Just imagine you're like thin slicing tomato or something, but just thin slice your herbs. If you make a nice little bunch like that with your herbs, they will stay together pretty well. And it means you don't have to spend a lot of time running your knife over them, bruising them, releasing all of their oils into the sheet or the cutting board. You really want those oils to stay available for you to eat. It's where all the flavor comes from. And so if you can, just run your knife over it once. That looks like I did a pretty good job, so I'm not even going to bother cutting that again. So our dill is set. I'm going to toss that right into the bowl that we used earlier for the cauliflower. I haven't washed it or anything. All that salt and pepper in there is just going to make it taste better. So I'm going to toss some of that in the bowl. I'm actually going to toss some of it back on top of my cauliflower in the pan. I'm going to put that back in the oven in a second here to just warm up again. And that dill will have a chance to sort of cook a bit. And it'll give us two different dill flavors. We'll have that cooked dill flavor, and we'll also have the nice raw dill flavor from this dressing. Make sure we don't waste any of it. All right, cool. I think that's not going to need the cutting board anymore. Beautiful. We're coming close to completion here, my friends. So let's go ahead and flip those other guys. Beautiful. I probably could have let these guys cook for a little bit longer. We're going to go for it. They'll recover. Beautiful. I'm just going to leave the little dumpling ones just like that. They're just going to have that one side of crispy. Make sure you rotate your pans. Let's double check this. Yeah, sweet. So yeah, just opening it those couple times, my temperature is already down to 370. So I'm definitely going to keep it at 400. And we'll just see how things go. Take a check on my onions. One of the ways you can tell the onions have started to pickle properly is they'll start to turn pink instead of red, and the brine will start to turn pink as well. And that means that they're really releasing all of that, the rest of that moisture and the color pigments, and it's all being replaced with vinegar, which is what we want. We want them to taste nice and vinegary, still have a good onion bite and be crispy. So those look perfect. Those are probably going to be done right in time for our meal. So those have both been flipped now, so we'll set our timer again. And hopefully when that goes off, they'll be done. So we're actually going to throw cauliflower back in there as well. All right, sweet. So sauce for the cauliflower is Dijon mustard, maple syrup, apple cider vinegar, and salt. I don't even necessarily need the salt, but you might need it depending on how the flavor turns out. So I'm going to need a little spatula. Where'd my little spatula go? So this way you should always have everything prepared beforehand. There we go. So I got my little spatula. This thing's really cool. It's like a little flipping spatula, but it also works really good for getting everything out of a jar like this. So I'm going to take probably, let's say like 4 tablespoons, quarter cup of Dijon. There's a recipe for this, like I said, but if you follow that, it will turn out really good. But I just like to sort of do it by eye based off of sort of how I'm feeling. And right now I'm actually feeling really mustardy. So we'll probably use way more mustard than the recipe said. So about a quarter cup. I've only got about a tablespoon or so right there. So I'm going to use some more of this, this ground Dijon. That looks good. Just for reference for you guys, so you can sort of see how much I used. Basically, pretty good amount. And then we're gonna match that Dijon with some maple. Let's go 1/3 of a cup, let's say. And again, I'm just eyeballing it. About 1/3 of a cup of maple syrup. Maple syrup and mustard is such a good combination. Honey and mustard also, in general, sort of sweet things, sweet natural things, and mustard is just, it just works really well together. Mustard's got a really intense sort of spiciness to it that's very unique to it, and having something sweet to go with that is really just a nice, pleasurable experience. So sweet. So that's looking good. And we're just gonna hit it with a little bit of apple cider vinegar. I like apple cider for this as opposed to any other, just because it's got Oh, it smells so good. It's just got that very unique to it flavor. Nothing really tastes like apple cider vinegar except for apple cider vinegar. And so we're gonna toss a bit in there, and I'd say maybe about a third a cup of that as well. And we want this to be fairly liquidy because we are gonna put hot cauliflower in there, so a little bit of the moisture is gonna evaporate from that heat, and the liquid's gonna help it to get into all those little crevices of the cauliflower florets, and just stick to it. So it doesn't matter if it's a bit soupy. That's kind of what you're looking for. This is probably way too much, but so just take a look at it there. Can you see that? Yeah. So it's a really nice sauce. You get plenty of chunks of dill in there. Really intense. And we're just gonna let that hang out. Let's put just a touch of salt. The salt will help the dill to release its flavors as well, just like it did with our onions that we pickled. So we'll let this hang out for a bit. Take a quick taste. Oh, that's really good. Oh my God, yeah. Ooh, baby. Okay, I just want to go get some bread and dip that in there. Who cares about cauliflower? So that's perfect. But again, you can't go wrong. That's really, really sour, really, really not super sweet. So like, if you wanted it sweeter, you could just add a little more maple syrup in there. But I definitely put a lot more apple cider than I was anticipating. And I used a different mustard too. So I think sort of all that came together and made a sauce that was not what I was expecting, but I'm still very, very happy with it. That's really good. So that's going to be absolutely perfect on the cauliflower when it comes out of the oven. We're just waiting for the cauliflower to get warm again, because when it's nice and hot like that and sizzling, and you put it on a liquid like this, it just changes the whole experience. It helps to cook the dough that's in there and the mustard and sort of get it to all break down, and it all sticks to the hot cauliflower. I do this technique as well with like green beans. I really like either roasted or pan seared green beans. You want to get like sort of the green beans almost like burnt on a couple sides, and then you put those hot green beans into like a sesame, soy, and rice vinegar mixture, and you toss them up, and then the green beans heat up the liquid and sort of finish cooking in a liquid, so they sort of steam and get soft, even though they're like basically burnt, and that works out really, really well. So that is one of my favorite things to do in this same method of sort of glazing, basically. Hot food in cold sauce gives you a really sort of unique experience. Cool. We are about 5 minutes out from hopefully our first falafel being done. So I'm going to take myself a quick little break, if you know what I'm saying. Feel free to do the same if you haven't as well. And let's check and see if there's any questions. I'm actually just going to toss this up to me because I think we're done with the proper cooking things. Shun, Nora Knives, and Henkel. Yes, those are my three. Yep, and that's how you spell them, I'm pretty sure. Shun, S-H-U-N? Yeah, S-H-U-N. Cool, perfect. All right, guys, if anybody else has any questions, now is definitely the time. I'm just gonna hang here and chat about my day. Maybe
have enough for all of us?
Yes.
Do you have enough for all of us?
I made enough for 6 people. So we're gonna have to draw straws, or we'll just eat half as much.
That's tough. That's a lottery for the falafel.
A falottery.
Exactly. That's great, Chris. Looks amazing. And thanks for, it was so good to see the hands-on with the tahini, because that can be a little tricky.
Yeah, it's weird. And I definitely used way too small a bowl. Like, use a giant bowl.
Yeah.
It gets awkward. And even like, I feel like I have pretty good stirring technique, and I still got it everywhere. So
I was wondering, that reminded me of, not every time, but I'd say every other time I try to make a sauce with peanut butter.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a little tricky. You really got to get the wrist action in there.
That was just the oven preheating again. My crazy electric oven. I do love electric. It's beautiful to have the possibility in the future of, solar panels and being off grid and such, but man, it's just not. It's crazy. Make cooking so crazy. Everything's always on, off, on, off. just like kittens, you know, it's just there's all it is for electric. It's on and off.
Yeah. It took a lot of getting used to when I moved up from New York.
But it's nice to have. I'm excited to be in a place where if I needed to, I could you know, go full battery and stuff. So it's
That's great.
certainly helpful.
Great. So when you it looks amazing in the picture that you shared with us, on a bed of greens, which is really lovely, and I can see you throwing those pickled onions right on top of that and drizzling the tahini on there. But it's also good on flatbread.
Yep.
It's good. I don't know. I've made homemade pita a couple of times, and I do have a very simple recipe that I can send to everybody who was here today. I didn't think of it though, but it's great tucked in pita,
Yep.
obviously, and really good if you're really hungry for a midnight snack. And there's some cold ones in the fridge.
Oh, so Jan, so the cauliflower, yeah, I was kind of rambling there. What I put is I put a little bit of dill on the cauliflower before I put it back in the oven, and we're just getting it hot in the oven so that when I toss it back in the sauce sort of cooks with the cauliflower. So no sauce in the oven, just a little bit of dill to start infusing the cauliflower with that flavor. And then we're gonna put the hot cauliflower into the cold sauce. So no sauce into the oven. That I mean, you could do that, but the pan would get a mess, and I hate cleaning up hard messes. So I always try and make it as easy as possible for myself. I hope that helped. I'm actually going to take the cauliflower out now because I think it's done. All right, nice. So cauliflower is nice and hot and steamy. We're just going to toss it right into our sauce here. You can see the dill. Oh wait, let me change this back. Boop. The dill, it's like steaming, and the dill has sort of dried out a little bit on top of it. It's just exactly what we want. So we're just gonna go right into the sauce with that hot cauliflower. This is another reason why, like I said, I don't really like putting the sauce on the pan, because this pan is like, pan's basically clean already. I don't have to do anything. All my pans have, you know, oil and grease slicks on them from being used far too heavily and not cleaned up properly, but that's okay. Seasoning is always good. That's what we call it. We don't call it dirty, we call it seasoned. So we're gonna do a little toss on this, just like we did before when we were, and it's crazy, right? That's the exact same amount of cauliflower we had in this bowl before, but it's just like, it's half as much space. So we're gonna do a little toss like we did before. Get them nice and glazed. Oh my God, yes. I'm so excited. And the smell is just divine. As the heat hits that mustard, it starts to release all of its, the same thing that sort of gives you that nose burning, starts to get released, but this is much sweeter and tastier. Yeah, that's good. I'm actually gonna get in there with a spoon too, just to make sure we get it all. This is a nice stirring technique. I don't know if you guys can see the specifics. I think you can. You want to sort of scoop the bottom and then around the side and then flip over. Scoop the bottom around the side and flip over. Then turn your bowl. Scoop the bottom around the side and turn over. That's a really good way to coat things without making a huge mess. When I used to work in a wing shack, we just put everything in a bucket and shake, shake, shake. But when you didn't have buckets, you had to make do. And so that's where I learned sort of this technique. You don't want wings flying all over the kitchen. But as you start, you scrape the bottom and then flip over. Scrape the bottom and flip over and turn the bowl as you go. It's a really nice, sort of gentle, it's basically you're folding it in. And that helps to keep things together without getting all over the place. And so here is a done cauliflower. Let's see if we can get it to focus on there. Get up there. There we go.
That's good.
You can see there's dill all in there, all over the place. It's nice and glazed and sweet. And the flavor is really good. You're gonna have to trust me until you can make it yourself, but it's perfect. It's nice and saucy, so you can like eat it with rice. In this case, I'm gonna put some on my falafel as like a sauce, basically. And it's really good. It's always nice when you cook something and it turns out well, and then you eat it and you say, look at me, look what I did. Oh, nice. You're cooking along with us, Jan. Thanks. That's really impressive. I tend to go really fast, so I'm happy that that you are able to keep up. But yeah, no, totally fine that you put sauce on it before putting it back in the oven. It's not going to hurt it at all. In fact, it might even be better than this technique. But this is my technique I like because it's just easier to clean up, like I said. So you might have discovered the ultimate cauliflower by doing that. So that's
Chris, can I ask you something about roasting vegetables generally?
yeah, definitely. What's up?
Do you tend to put them in shifts, or do you just choose a temperature and toss them all in together?
Sure. Um, nice. Yours probably look, Jan, I'm betting yours look better than mine because you probably put more love into them. I'm not saying I didn't put love into them, but I tend to just sort of like go and do. And for me, if it tastes good, that's all that matters. So I'm excited. If you want to take any pictures and send them to Virginia, I would love that. I'll toss them up on the blog. But yeah, so for veggies, I do tend to just do a really hot oven. Usually, like if I'm doing larger veggies with more moisture, like carrots or potatoes, I'll go straight up to 500, and I'll just do them all at once. And I'll burp the oven. It's really important when you're doing a large batch like that to burp the oven every now and then. You want to get that moisture out. If you have a convection oven, that's even better because that will just do it for you. But I don't. Well, rather I do, but my convection oven is sort of not appropriate because it tends to just cool the oven down because the electric coil can't keep up. So if you burp the oven, you can definitely overload it. I'll use all 3 racks, but you just want the temperature to be super duper high. That way the oven can recover fast and it still gets that nice roast. And if you find that as long as you don't crowd your pans, it should be fine to do 3 full racks of veggies as long as the temp's high and like I said, you don't crowd your pan and you burp the oven. You should get perfect roast veggies. And for me, perfect roast veggies are still like a little bit solid inside, but like have a nice sort of almost like skin on the outside. Turnips are so good, like little curries in the spring.
Nice and caramelized.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so I missed my timer. That's right, the timer did go off. Whoops. It's okay. These falafel are going to be just fine. Oh yeah. Nice. All right, so those ones are done. The ones I put in second definitely could use a bit more time. So I'm just going to flip them again and put them back in. But I'll give you a look at the ones we made. Wow, these look so good. You know what, I'm actually just going to, I think they actually are done. They're fine. So sweet. So let's take a little peek. So these are one of our little sample that we wanted to experiment with, are almost like our little dumplings. But the bottom got really nice and brown, like I thought. And the top is just sort of like solid. And you could flip them if you wanted to and squish them down. But I kind of like them like this. It's almost like a marzipan or something. And let's just make sure that they're cooked. Yeah, perfectly fine. So that's a fun technique that you could do if you want. You don't have to flip them, which is nice. Just let that bottom get super crispy. But if we're looking at some of the other ones, we got a pretty decent brown on that side, much better on this side. And I'm okay with that. You can't really there's not going to always have perfect contact with the oil. Let's see if we have a perfect one. This one's pretty good. Nice little brown on that side. Perfect brown on that side. And that's the first side that went down. And that's why, because it was soft, so it sort of like melted into the pan. And then once the outside sort of got crispy and you flipped it, it didn't really have that ability. So we could have smushed them down, maybe that would have helped. But that's fully cooked. Tastes really good. Just rip it apart. It's nice and steamy inside. And all you got to do is dip it right in your tahini sauce. That's perfect. A little bit of cauliflower. Brings it all together. So I'll just give you a little flyby real quick. There's my dudes on the oven pans. There's our cauliflower and our tahini sauce. And that, guys, is Chef Look Cooks. I hope you guys enjoyed yourself.
Chris, and next month, it's going to be December 17th.
Yes. So next month will be December 17th. And yes, Jan, that's what I mean. Basically, I don't even open it. Here, I'll just show you real quick. I don't even open it all the way. I'll just do this and then close it. You're just basically trying to get that steam that's accumulated at the top of the oven out. And then you can just close it back up again because you don't want to get the heat out, but you do want to get that moisture out. And if you do that, it'll really help to get anything crispy because moisture tends to accumulate in your oven as it is released from the food. But yeah, so next month we're going to do December 17th. I came up with, I think, a pretty good idea. Should I tell everybody, Virginia?
Don't give it away. It'll be in our newsletter.
Okay, it'll be in our newsletter. It's a really fun sort of holiday play. I'm really excited about it. I'm going to do a test batch probably next week because that's how much I can't wait for it. But yeah, check out our newsletter. Check out the food blog if you guys haven't already. Trash Panda EPL at wordpress.com. It's going to have all these recipes on it, and we will be posting this on the YouTube as well tomorrow. So it'll all be available to share with your friends, to look back on later when you forget what the recipes were, etc. And or if you just need to see and say hi to me, I'll be there.
Thank you, Chris. That was great.
Thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
We'll see you next month.
Bye-bye.
Bye.